Revelation 12. So the great dragon was cast out, that serpent of old, called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. Excuse me. Nobody needs reminding about the human capacity to mislead and deceive. It's a common theme throughout the Word, beginning with the story of the serpent in the Garden of Eden as the source of all lies. And when that serpent of old is cast out in the book of Revelation, the implied promise is that someday our tendency to tell lies will also be overcome. Everybody understands how problematic lying is, and everybody loves honesty. And everybody loves honest people. And yet everybody engages in deceptions, and although the basic rights and wrongs of it are easy to understand, it can also be a surprisingly confusing subject. So our topic today is an attempt to explain how lying was invented, going back to the dishonesty described by the serpent and the dragon. And then we'll look at the Lord's beautiful solution to this fundamental problem of human existence. The serpent's lie was the idea that worldly knowledge is more trustworthy and more valuable than spiritual knowledge. And the issue of deception is actually inherent in the distinction between the physical world that we can see and the spiritual world that we can't see. It's a distinction which means that although since thoughts and intentions can't be observed, they must not be as important as what we can observe. Now, deception exists even with animals. Monkeys, for example, will sometimes sound a warning alarm when they're squeezed out of access to a source of food, and when the other monkeys run for cover, they stay behind and feast. But lying is especially an aspect of the human ability to separate the will and the understanding, something that came into existence especially with the end of the most ancient, or the celestial church, and the beginning of the ancient or spiritual church. And this is also associated with the development of spoken language. The most ancients, the earliest peoples, we are told, barely spoke, and they communicated instead mostly by means of facial expressions. We read in the Arcana Celestia that the people of the celestial church, or the most ancient church, spoke not so much by means of vocal utterances, as they did in latter times, and as we do today, but like angels by means of ideas. And they were able to express ideas by means of countless alterations in their facial expressions and in their looks, and especially by means of alterations around the lips, where there are innumerable threads of muscular fibers, which are all knotted up nowadays, but which had freedom of movement in those times. And they were in this way able to present, mean, and represent inside a minute things which nowadays take an hour by the use of articulated sounds or utterance. So there are two aspects of the kind of speech described here. The first is that it is more efficient and more complete than articulate speech. But the second is that it was completely honest. We read, people in most ancient times were such that the face was in complete accord with internal things, so that anyone could see from another person's face the character of his disposition or mind. And being celestial people, whatever they were thinking shone out of their face and eyes, which altered correspondingly. and they were quite incapable of assuming facial expressions that did not accord with what they were thinking. And remarkably, we are told that their facial expressions were governed by the cerebellum, the involuntary part of the brain at that time. So that's how it was among the most ancient peoples, the peoples of the Golden Age, or the people of the celestial church. But when this church became corrupted, as is described in Genesis by their being expelled from the Garden of Eden, these things changed. And the separation then of the will and the understanding with the people of the succeeding age, the people of the ancient church, meant that they did not any longer need to be driven by their now corrupt will to live selfishly, but could learn. They could learn to behave in selfless and loving ways, even if those actions did not represent what they actually felt. So they could behave in that way, and their internals could then change in accordance. Facial expressions then came to be governed by the cerebrum, the voluntary portion of the brain. And this distancing of a person's outer demeanor and communication from what they actually think and will allows for a process of reform and of reformation and regeneration to take place. That is, we can learn to behave well and eventually come to love to behave well. However, this also allows for lying and deception. And the development of spoken language greatly facilitated this. Now, there are two great issues with spoken and written language, and they are adequacy and reliability. As a memorized system of symbols and sounds, they actually have no organic connection to the things they represent, unlike facial expressions. And as a result, they not only describe thoughts and feelings imperfectly, but they can easily become means of deception. And these two issues plague all of our communications and all of the information that we deal with on a daily basis. We can never be sure whether to trust it. It may be mistaken. It may be inadequate. It may be hard to understand. And it may be intentionally deceptive. We're all, therefore, kind of on this lifetime quest, both individually and together as a whole, to discover what's actually true. We continually monitor the reliability of the information that we receive. We consider the source. We examine the information itself. And we value people who we consider to be intelligent and honest. As individuals, however, for our part, we are almost inevitably dishonest to some degree. One of the problems of human language is that it allows us to communicate in ways that favor our own thoughts and interests. The subjective nature of human experience, the vagueness of much of the information that we deal with, the requirements and expectations of social and business interactions, and our own ambitions and anxieties cause us to stretch the truth in small ways and sometimes in large ways. And we also misunderstand what it is that actually constitutes lying. How frank do you actually have to be? There was a 2009 film called The Invention of Lying, and it imagines what contemporary American life would be like if lying did not exist. It's a humorous movie, and it depicts people as brutally honest about everything, resulting in depressing social interactions, cruelly competitive office politics, and a completely dispassionate and pitiless medical system. And the crux of the movie is that at some point a man invents the concept of life after death in an effort to comfort his dying mother. And when he does this, when he says, "Mom, when you die, it's not just blackness. You'll be going to a beautiful new world where everything will be wonderful." And he goes on about this, and when he looks up, he sees that the whole hospital staff has gathered around saying, tell us more about this, because they believed everything. And in that moment, he invented lying, according to this movie. And according to this, he then, in doing this, sets the ball rolling towards the world of misinformation and fraud that we all know so well. Not a movie to be taken seriously. But the truth is that honesty is meaningless without charity. The ancients were able to be completely honest about their thoughts and intentions because we read, they were never afraid that others might know their ends and intentions, for they willed nothing but good. For anyone who allows himself to be led by the Lord never intends or thinks anything else. And in our world, the point of tactful and polite speech is to promote charity. So honesty doesn't usually require the kind of blunt speech that we sometimes imagine it does. True honesty is only possible where there is love and kindness. And similarly, on a personal basis, regeneration is not possible unless we are able to be honest with ourselves. And the more disorderly our life is, the harder it is for us to be honest with ourselves. Because when a person is involved in practices that aren't good, we read this. In the Arcana Celestia, it says, he looks around then for ideas such as will support the notion that the thing isn't an evil until he becomes thoroughly convinced that it's not. And then he strives so far as he can to get rid of external restraints and to make this thing allowable and smart and at length even attractive and honorable. These efforts to justify evil confuse and mislead people all over the world. And that's why in our lesson we read that this eighth commandment in the spiritual sense means convincing people that a false belief is a true one and an evil life is a good one. And this phenomena is especially pernicious in this day and age with the sophisticated arguments that we have access to. So we read at the present day, there are persons who not only disbelieve everything they cannot see and feel, but who confirm themselves in such incredulity by knowledges unknown to the ancients, and thus occasion in themselves a far greater degree of blindness. And so it's no wonder that so many people today are misled by false and dishonest information. But fortunately, these same knowledges unknown to the ancients can also have the opposite effect. The inadequacy and the unreliability of information it's a problem everybody is aware of, and this means that it's an issue that people have been thinking about for a long time in a ceaseless quest for the truth, as we mentioned above. And the result is that there have been developments that make it easier to know the truth and easier to avoid deception than ever used to be the case. A remarkable aspect of the times that we live in is that a large part of what we do and what we say is documented. We communicate by email or letter, or recorded or text messages, and we receive information in written, videotaped, or published forms that can be endlessly replicated and examined. Our daily activities leave a discoverable trail of transactions, movements, and appearances that may have seemed unimaginable even 50 years ago. The Heavenly Doctrines tell us that everything in our life is actually recorded in our memory. and that after death, it can be examined. It's called our book of life. And as we go through the process of understanding our true nature in the next life, it can sometimes be played back to us so that we see exactly what we did. And this is especially true when we deny the kind of life that we led. We say, well, I never did anything like that. And they say, oh yeah, and they play it back for us, and we see exactly what we did. So it's all recorded. And this is what is meant by the Lord's words in Luke, where he says, there's nothing covered that will not be revealed, nothing hidden that will not be known. Whatever you have spoken in the dark will be heard in the light. What you have spoken in the ear, in the inner rooms, will be proclaimed in the housetops. So in the past, this idea must have seemed amazing and unbelievable, but it's an increasingly familiar reality to people today, and it can have a good effect. And it really does help keep people honest. Studies show, for example, that people are many times more likely to tell lies in phone calls, which are not normally recorded, than in emails, online, or text messages. Because all those things can be played back and discovered. When we're talking on the phone, it's not as permanent. But on a larger scale, the development of the scientific method and evidence-based research has greatly increased the adequacy and the reliability of our information about the physical world. And the same need is filled in spiritual things by the existence of the Word, the Lord's Word. This highlights the importance of a confidence in and belief in what the Word teaches, and it also highlights the need for a sophisticated, fully explanatory guide to this belief that can withstand the assaults of our skeptical age. And this, of course, is what the heavenly doctrines of the New Jerusalem are intended to do. And learning these things and being reminded of them really does change your life. In an experiment conducted among MIT students, they were asked to solve a series of 10 very difficult math problems and given only 5 minutes to do it. Now, the average student completed only 4 of them, even though they were brilliant students. When, however, they were told to take the test, shred it so there's no evidence, and then merely report how many they got right, the average number that they got right increased to 7. They were lying. But when the same thing was repeated, obviously with another group, but they were first asked to write down as many of the 10 commandments as they could remember, the average then returned down to 4. They were telling the truth. And the same was true when they were asked to sign at the top of the page their agreement to abide by the MIT honor code, even though no such code actually exists. The point is, everybody knows that honesty is important, and almost any kind of feeble reminder will make us more honest. We in this room will be more honest today for I don't know how long, just because we've considered this topic today. Because everybody knows that honesty is right. But externally motivated honesty isn't really enough. As we read in our lesson, let it be known that a person must do these commandments from religion, because they are commanded by the Lord. And if he does them from any other consideration, whatever, for instance, from regard merely to the civil law or the moral law, he remains natural and does not become spiritual. Because it's important that we do these things from the Lord, for eternal reasons. But still, external motivations help us develop habits and norms. And these serve as a basis for growth. And and for the development of a true spiritual conscience over time as we realize the true good that lies within it. So everyone loves an honest person, and we both sorrow at the serpent's deception at the beginning of the Word in the Garden of Eden, and we rejoice in his downfall, the dragon, that serpent of old, in the book of Revelation. And it often seems like the world is more deceptive than ever and getting worse all the time, but the Lord's means of combating the serpent also grows more powerful over time, and we know that he will win. So honesty and sincerity are really about love and charity, about living a good life and avoiding evil, so that what is in our hearts can shine out in our faces. And so we finish with the words from Psalm 15 that we sang at our interlude. Lord, who may abide in your tabernacle? Who may dwell in your holy hill? He who walks uprightly and works righteousness and speaks the truth in his heart. Amen.